Okay, welcome Internet. This is the IPython Jupyter development meeting for June 9th. Let's see, we have in our agenda.
Yeah, so first thing is a buff at SciPy, targeting especially Jupyter. Do we have other buff you want to participate to?
There's a Python 3 buff.
Is that actually happening, or was that just a hypothetical thing someone mentioned?
I think. Oh, I thought.
Is there a schedule of the current boss?
It's more you tell what you want to do and which one conflict with, and the organizer will try to figure it out.
Okay, I probably want to go to the matplotlib buff or any visualization buff. But I think we should do a Jupyter buff, though.
The buff process is a bit self-organizing at the beginning, so I suggest bring your list of desired conflicts to avoid. Yeah. Tell them at the beginning, and it all happens kind of in a somewhat self-organizing way at the beginning. Kyle Manley seems to be doing a really good job trying to coordinate something and help people do the best job possible. So work with him.
So. Who wants to go to the Python 3 buff? Who wants to organize the Jupyter buff, if there is one?
I can organize the Jupyter buff.
I'm not going to SciPy.
Oh, we'll be missed.
I can stick Saul in our luggage.
Yeah.
We can roll you around.
Yeah, I guess if we disassemble Saul, one piece per person. You can smuggle him in quite easily.
Soul can travel.
Okay, so that's it.
Sure. SciPy table.
Yeah, so the SciPy conference is generously providing free booth tables for open source projects, and they have slots that you can sign up for. And I've listed the slots that are available each day, and then I basically just sort of randomly picked one of the slots each day, and the days that I've picked, I've labeled there. So on Wednesday, I picked the annual reception, Thursday, the afternoon break, and Friday, the morning break. We could sign up for more if we want.
The ones that don't have a day, are those? What does that mean? Are they?
No, all of the first 4 slots. The breakfast, morning break, lunch, and afternoon break are available all days. I just haven't signed up for those slots. I just wasn't sure how much time we wanted to spend at the table.
Sure. I'm not going to be there, so I can't speak for anyone's time.
I think we will be already pretty busy with people asking us questions all the time.
Yeah. As we discussed last time, we talked about this. Like SciPy is not a conference where I think we need to advertise.
Yeah, I think 3 slots is probably plenty for.
Okay, yeah, that's sort of what I thought. I mean, I didn't want to overdo it, but I felt like.
Yeah, and yes, the booths aren't a big part of SciPy.
Yeah.
That just being there for some amount of time is.
Yeah. Okay, well then I will just leave the slots that I've signed up for, and we'll go with that. Great.
Perfect.
Okay, so subcommands with dashes.
Thomas.
Oh, yes, so this is just a pull request that has been sitting around for a while. So when Mint implemented the subcommand mechanism for Jupyter whatever, we said that it would work with commands that are Jupyter-notebook becomes Jupyter space notebook, but we didn't really talk about what happens if there are extra hyphens. So the IPython install-nd extension, that's one command, that became Jupyter install-nd extension, except that the mechanism for subcommands treats that as a 2-level subcommand, so it treats it as an install subcommand with an nd extension subcommand, which I don't think that's what we actually want, and I think it doesn't really work because it's Right, in that specific case, I don't think that's what we want at least. I think it doesn't currently work because there isn't an install subcommand.
Well, so the only thing that doesn't work right now is the listing of subcommands. In terms of how the logic is, hyphens and spaces behave the same. So Jupyter install NB. I mean, it does work right now. Jupyter install NB extension.
Okay.
It's just the listing that it shows. It assumes that NB extension is a subcommand of install.
It assumes it is or is not?
It assumes it is.
Okay.
But it still calls it directly. So when you do, if you have a 10-level nested subcommand or something, it doesn't do 10 calls to dispatch. It calls the leaf node directly from the top level.
Gotcha. Nice.
Is it? I mean, that
is what it does.
It's simplest. Yeah, I mean, it is what it does. I was asking, is it nice? I mean, that we've decided we want to use this Python subcommand mechanism for our own subcommands, but that prevents any project using any other subcommand mechanism, right?
Why?
Because, I mean, because we do the dispatch all the way down to the last subcommand. If there was if NB grader wanted to have subcommands that worked by a different route, for example,
we should find the last leaf that exists, rather than.
Okay, but then you have to do successive calls or successive
Which calls?
Which calls? Yeah.
How do other packages that do command line subcommands handle this? Like, does Git allow nested subcommands?
Yeah.
And are they?
So I don't think there are any subcommands that are not files in Git.
Oh, okay. That I guess that was part of my question. Is how strictly do we want to follow the idea that all subcommands are a separate file? And it's sure a simple approach of handling it.
Yeah. My understanding is that that's how Git works, right? Git foo.
Actually, both of these, I know that I've written the code and I don't remember it, but both of these things work. So notebook list is a Python provided subcommand that's not on the path.
Oh. Okay.
And Jupyter notebook list works. I'm not entirely sure how
Which
at this point.
Which one of you wrote the code?
Not me, apparently. In any case, I don't think there are any subcommand mechanisms that don't work right now.
Okay, so then
just the listing that is wrong right now.
The listing of subcommands.
The listing in the help output of the Jupyter command.
And what it fails in what case?
When you have a subcommand with a hyphen in it.
It's listed as.
It's listed as the first part, even though the first part doesn't exist.
Gotcha. So it's listed as Jupyter space install space NB extension.
No, it's listed as Jupyter install, which just plain doesn't exist.
Okay. And can we fix the listing without breaking how everything is working?
Search
yes,
mechanism.
totally. They're very very different.
Can I make a suggestion?
Yeah.
Which is that so there's been some talk about adding a functionality to the NB extension stuff for like activating and deactivating them as well. In NB Grader, I actually have NB Grader NB extension, and then that has 3 subcommands, which are install, activate, and deactivate. So maybe, I mean, this problem would go away if it were NB extension -install, and
have it actually be a subcommand of the install be a subcommand of
and then that would make it easier in the future to add this additional stuff like activation and deactivation.
Yes.
Yeah, since there are multiple actions to take on a given NB extension.
I very much like that idea.
Does that make sense to me?
Okay. How do you even get to this?
Okay.
somewhere can you do dash help.
Okay, NB Grader updates and release timeline. I suspect this is mostly on Jess.
Yeah, I just wanted to give a quick status update. I've been working on trying to I accumulated like 1 million things to do over the course of the semester, and now I'm trying to actually do all of them, and hopefully get a first release of NB Grader out in the next maybe 2 or 3 weeks is my goal. We'll see how well that goes. But yeah, I just wanted to say that update. But things are going well with that. I think once I finally check off all of these things on my to-do list, NB Grader is going to be it's already in a pretty good spot. It's going to be in an even better spot. So.
Yeah, and I finish my last final tomorrow, Jess. So my time is going to start to open up, and I can definitely help get NB Grader ready. I don't know. I don't know if I'll be able to do a lot of actual coding, but at least help with design and code review.
Okay, great. Maybe we can have a meeting over Hangouts or something later in the week then.
Oh, great.
Real-time follow-up, the thing I said about the leaf nodes was a total lie. That's why it still works, is it only dispatches one level, and it does hierarchically.
Okay.
That's why it actually works, is because they're not doing anything clever.
Okay. Well, if people were going to have 10 levels deep of subcommands, that might be an issue, but I think with 1 or 2 levels, it's just not a big deal.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, doc organization.
Yeah, so I'm hearing echo now. Is that... I'm hearing myself talk back to me. There, that's better. Can you still hear me, though?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, now I hear the echo again.
Let's mute ourselves.
I'm just going to turn the sound down a little bit because it's actually quite loud here. Try
What?
Testing? I still hear myself.
Let's see. Let's mute ourselves.
Can you hear me? Nod? Okay. I'll go ahead. Kyle's laughing.
I thought you should play some California, some surf rock, like Beach Boys, and sing.
So the documentation organization, John was up here last week for 2 days, and he and I sat down and spent some time working on documentation. We created a Jupyter/Jupyter repo to hold the main Jupyter meta package that we've talked about, and then also the central docs landing page. And if we want to talk about putting the central docs landing pages in a different repo, we can, but we just wanted something to exist so we could get started with it. And then we started to sketch the docs landing page, and it's currently linked to there in the hackpad jupyter.readthedocs.org. And if you want to click on that, I can sort of walk through our thinking on it. And the idea is that this would be the main user-focused entry point for documentation. And part of what John and I realized as we started to sketch this out is that while it may be perfectly clear in our minds what capabilities map onto which repos, that is probably not at all obvious to users. And so we've tried to organize this in a way that's sort of functionality focused. So when a user comes to this page, they're thinking, I'm using Python and I have a question about the widgets. Where would that be? And so the main sections of this document, the first page, one, there's an installation that has a link to an installation overview. I'll talk about that in a second. There's a section on user interfaces, which has links to the Notebook console and Qt console. And for each of these things, there's a link to the documentation in Read the Docs, if it exists, the GitHub repo, and then the Gitter chat room. At times, we redirect Gitter chat rooms to other appropriate Gitter chat rooms. Not all repos have active Gitter chat rooms, and it would be great to have everyone's help figuring out which Gitter chat room should be used for each project. Can everyone just nod so that you?
Yeah, we were muted to try to keep your echo down.
Yeah.
Maybe it got better again. We actually had a long conversation just offline here one afternoon about we were realizing that the mushrooming of GitHub repos, the mushrooming of Gitter rooms is probably not a good thing for us, and we probably want to curtail the number of Gitter rooms overall in the project, because otherwise it just becomes confusing. You don't want to be tracking 100 chat rooms. Makes absolutely no sense whatsoever.
Yeah, for the most part, dev of all projects should probably be just in one room.
Yeah.
With a couple exceptions.
Gitter room, even if they have history, you will never be able to search or point someone to a piece of history. So I think it's a bad idea to redirect people to Gitter.
To what?
To Gitter. I mean, Gitter is nice if you want to have a conversation with someone, which you get a quick exchange. But after, you get like zero Google visibility. You cannot use that as reference for later. You cannot do that asynchronously if you have 10 people participating in a conversation.
Yeah.
Gitter is really bad.
Yeah.
Chat in general, you mean?
Yeah, chat.
Yeah. The archival and asynchronous value of chat is essentially zero.
Yeah, absolutely. But I still think we should
point to it as a real-time resource.
Yeah,
exactly.
We're just learning that
it's not good documentation.
It's not good documentation, and it's not an archival resource. It's a real-time resource.
Yeah, it's like
those are just two different things.
Does that make it appropriate or inappropriate to have linked to live help on the documentation?
No, I think it is a resource. I think it exists. I think we're learning and understanding the different dynamics it introduces, right? And
so one of the problems is when I go to Gitter and I see 100 messages, I don't even know what people have asked. So I don't know what people we'll basically lose statistics on what are the issues that people encounter.
Yeah, possibly instead of like a link for each individual repo saying just chat room, I think I would structure this overview page a bit differently, so that there is kind of like a user section, and then at the bottom of that there is a thing saying get help, and that can, or support or whatever, and that can link to Stack Overflow, to mailing lists, to the Gitter.
And I would like much prefer leaving the choice to each repo to point to a Gitter room if needed, because I really don't like chat, and I think it's a mistake to do that, because like we have sometimes at night 10 questions on Gitter and nobody will answer, and people are just like, the fuck, these people link to the Gitter repo, we ask questions and we don't get answers.
So I have a question. The reason we ended up putting those links there is that we also want this page to be useful to people who are engaging with our project, maybe not developing it, but trying to use the building blocks to do development. And those people do end up often on our dev Gitter chat rooms.
And they should first ask questions on mailing list, and if you need a one-to-one discussion or something quickly, you just let's go to Gitter, and then it's fine. But otherwise, it's like if someone comes to the mailing list, a developer comes to the mailing list, ask questions that interest actually other people that are on the mailing list, like the question is useless for these other people. If you're not on Gitter, it's like, for me, Gitter does not exist. Gitter has no long-term. I mean, messages could be dropped after half an hour. It would be the same. It's not useful. In my opinion, Gitter is harming us more than anything else. I would prefer to give my own chat username to people and discuss with people directly than to use Gitter.
Well, but then no, I disagree with that in the sense that if there is going to be chat, like it's helpful for other people in the project to see and observe what's going on, even if it's real time and not archived.
Yeah, no. Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't go as far as you, Matthias, in sort of saying that it's not useful at all.
I didn't say that it's not useful at all. Like after half an hour, after what I mean, if you want to get a conversation with someone, like getting quick exchange or with a group of people, it's fine. But at something which is here and people can just come and write stuff,
it shouldn't be as prominent. But if you have a question, start at the mailing list. And then
yes. But I think we need to learn how to use the tool better in relationship to the other tools. Is what we're saying, because I do think that I mean, going fishing in the archives of a Gitter conversation is extraordinarily difficult, and to the point where I'm pretty sure almost no one does it.
Even reading back like 20 minutes of conversation or something is hard.
Exactly. Almost no one does.
It should be last resource.
Yes.
Last resource is Gitter.
Yes.
And I guess one thing I would mention is that with our development team becoming more and more distributed, I view Gitter as a tool that exists for our core developers to work in real time together.
So, frankly, Brian, you've been 9 hours away. Gitter is worth. When you will be in Europe, it's just forget it.
Yeah. When we're no longer in like the same time zone, like the value of asynchronous communication is going to be much more useful than synchronous communication.
But I think I mean, I agree and I disagree in the sense that there's some types of work that we're already doing on GitHub. I think where we're really suffering right now, and I think I and John feel this as well, everyone who's not Berkeley feels this much more strongly, is that a lot of work that needs to happen has to happen with people talking.
Yeah.
Like real time, either a video chat or Gitter.
Yeah.
And the thing that I like about Gitter is that it at least provides some sort of traceable record that other people can watch during the day to see, oh, look, Fernando and Matthias talked about this thing today. And if it's a Google Hangout, I have no idea.
In practice, like, you have no idea with Gitter either. Like, in principle, you could, but in principle, you could go and watch, like, public broadcasts of these meetings as well.
No, but I do.
I definitely do. So,
this is how
strange people. I do not like even when people have been talking for 20 minutes. It is too much. It's just too hard to go and try to follow that conversation again.
Oh no, I agree. But at least I know. Oh wow, Sylvan, Jason, and John last week were talking about signals and slots. Like it's the equivalent of being in the same room and hearing them over in the corner. Hey, they're talking about signals and slots.
You do that often? You look at the Gitter history often?
That's how I stay in touch with what's going on.
Okay. I really can't imagine looking through Gitter history with any regularity.
Yeah, my workflow on Gitter is coming now and then, and there is one message Mark Ola's read. I mean, there is no way I can spend 1 hour going through all things. Like everything which is on Gitter for the two of us is just non-existing after half a day.
But I mean,
the constant, like, when I am logged into it, the constant, like, there's new messages, like, distraction.
So, but how? And I guess the question is, I agree that using Gitter for user-focused help is something that we have to really be careful of, and I'm not thinking about that primarily right now. What I'm more thinking about is, what do we do about dev-to-dev
coordination of a distributed team?
Yeah, some conversations that need to be more real-time than GitHub.
Oh, you can go on Gitter, but you go on Gitter explicitly. You go on Gitter and you ask someone, hey, Thomas, can you jump on Gitter? I need to speak with you about something. And then you do that, but not point user or not by default have, hey, you want to ask questions, go on Gitter.
But what I'm saying is, when you and Thomas go on Gitter, I see that you've done that, and I know what you're talking about. And if you just go to him next, in some other channel,
we'll discuss first on an issue. You have an issue. You write your problem. There is an issue. You start to discuss on the issue. If the issue is too slow to answer the questions, you say, hey, let's open Gitter, get a discussion. Do the discussions on Gitter, which is fast. You can exchange, you can solve the problems, and then you get back to the issue and you say, okay, it's solved. We solved it on Gitter. Here is the result.
Yes.
I think the issue is is having. I think we need a little bit of a discipline of going back to channels where there can be summaries. I think we need to use the power of the rapid real-time communication, the value of the real-time communication that the chat channels provide, but we have to provide something that is a little bit more analyzable in an asynchronous fashion with archival value, whether it's the issue on GitHub that provides a point of record for that specific problem, right? Whether it's in a PR or an issue, or if it's more public-oriented on the mailing list, more for the more general development community, just summarizing the topic on the mailing list, like, oh, here's something, because it is true that trawling through the Gitter logs as a regular activity, that is impossible, right? I mean, the notion that we're going to spend an afternoon every Friday, that each one of us is going to block 4 hours on an afternoon every Friday to trawl through the Gitter logs to figure out what's been happening with the project, that's just not going to happen, right? And if we build up more and more Gitter activity through the week, I mean, unless Jess, part of your research is going to be to write the AI to kill all AIs that can do a Gitter digest for us of activity, that isn't going to happen. And I do worry about the fact that we are losing a certain amount of visibility of our own development, right? We are actually losing visibility of our own decision-making process and our own development because more of that is happening on Gitter, right? If you look at our own decision-making process, less of it is happening on the mailing list and more is happening on Gitter. Now, in some ways, that's a good thing because that means more of it is happening rapidly, more of it is happening very effectively, more of it is happening by people who are doing it full-time and quickly, and that's a good thing, right? Because it's people who can do it on a very rapidly iterating cycle. But the problem is that makes it very, very difficult for people to kind of latch onto that cycle, understand how the project is evolving, and we're seeing that. How do we recruit new people? How do we hire new people? How do we bring new people onto the community? How do we hire new postdocs and developers and whatnot, right? So there's kind of two sides to that. We need to ensure that as we have this rapid real-time cycle going on, we also create channels that the rest of us can attach to as well.
And one other thing I really like when Kyle is working on his project is he does PR again himself, and he just merges it immediately. But at least in my mails, I get like new PR merge, and it's just clear from the title of the PR. I know what Kyle has done. I don't have to review it. I can disagree with him after, but I see asynchronously, like 10 hours later, what he did, and I can just mark as unread, go through it, and come back later. Which Gitter is just completely awful for that. And
so I think, for example, what Matthias said of the practice, there's a discussion that starts on GitHub, well-structured, need for real time, hop on Gitter. Two people hash it out for 2 hours, and it's like, hey, go back, summarize on GitHub. Like, yeah, just take 5. If you spend 2 hours working on Gitter, take 10 minutes to summarize it back on GitHub. It will be useful later on to have that kind of 10-line summary of what happened, just like we do it right here on these notes on Etherpad.
So, I think I'm it sounds like we like the idea of using Gitter for real-time developer-to-developer communications, but that for user-oriented stuff, Gitter is not. We're not as thrilled about it.
And unless a user asks a questions and wants to interact with you, then you hop on Gitter with the user. And you can live debug, because like asking a user to run one command to know which version of IPython it is and wait half an hour to get the response and then respond 1 hour later is annoying for the user. But you ask user, come explicitly on GitHub, we will discuss with you, we'll solve that, and we will respond.
So the question is, do we want to have a Gitter help room, an actual Gitter help room?
There is one.
I think it is useful. I think
it's been quite valuable.
We also shouldn't exaggerate like how instant it is. You know, it's often multiple minutes between.
And we've always said that it's a best effort.
A significant fraction of what comes in the help room is either people in Western time zones who are up late at night, or people in Europe who are asking questions, between 11 and 3 a.m. our time, and then the last couple of things in the help room when I get up in the morning are usually questions from some time zone or something, and then that's the first thing I check and answer. But
so we think
I don't feel like there's necessarily an enormous difference between how quickly emails and GitHub issues get responded to and how quickly things on Gitter get responded to. I think there's a much higher likelihood that things on Gitter won't get responded to at all.
Yeah. There's that ethereal aspect of it.
And to some extent, that's nice for us. Like I don't feel the same pressure to respond to Gitter comments.
Yeah.
If I see something that says 12 hours ago, they've probably either gone to sleep or found a fix or.
Yeah, and then there have been plenty of people who have, in the same kind of IRC etiquette, although Gitter is strictly better than IRC, since IRC doesn't archive, there's this standard practice of you ask a question, you don't get a response, maybe you ask it again the next day or something. And so there've been people who've asked a question, 2 or 3 times, and then get an answer in that way. In the way that internet chat has always worked, Gitter still works that way, even though it's technically persistent.
Yeah,
You're less likely to lose things, but it's not unlikely that you lose things.
It has the etiquette of spoken word rather than written word.
Yeah.
I have a question about one particular aspect of communication, which is for stuff like Jupyter Hub deployments.
Yeah.
It seems like having that kind of communication, like when people come and ask questions, like how do I get this thing set up, that would be good for that to be archived. Most of it seems to happen on Gitter currently.
Yeah, that's true.
But it's also not really appropriate for GitHub issues because it's not like an issue about Jupyter Hub. It's just like how do I configure this? And it also probably isn't appropriate for the main Jupyter mailing list because it's like a very specific thing.
I think
it'll be fine on
I think it's fine on the mailing list, honestly.
One thing that
and people often do use GitHub issues as questions as well.
Yeah.
I think GitHub now makes a question tag for new repos. That's
One more
obviously
thing
up to us whether or not we want to encourage that. But
I think one thing that GitHub, and maybe to a lesser degree Gitter, but GitHub definitely has significantly reduced the traffic on the mailing list. And so one of the reasons to not put things like that might be specific or tangential or something on the mailing list is to pollute an already high traffic thing. But the Jupyter mailing list, well, I think a lot of people haven't moved from IPython to Jupyter, but the Jupyter mailing list is like 3 to 5 emails a week at this point.
Very low traffic.
For that reason, I think if we were drowning in traffic, I think we would police it much more aggressively. But given that we're not, I think it's fine. And having it helps people get to know each other, have a bit of a sense of a community that people working with the project. It helps us know who's using it. One of the values for us of seeing those questions, these are radar signals, right? It's like we know that these people are using the system, where they're using it, and what kinds of institutions and what kinds of deployments, right? Those are all super valuable signals when we go out there to search, look for funding, to look for resources, to try to do new things with the project. Knowing about these things is super useful, and that's another reason why having the questions come to a single place is useful. Even if it creates a bit of traffic, it's helpful. Yeah. It's a lot easier for us to track those questions when they're all coming to one mailing list than if we're tracking them in Stack Overflow and Gitter and kind of in disparate channels.
Yeah,
I don't mind them coming to the mailing list, to be very honest with you.
To some extent, I think Stack Overflow is a good place to ask questions.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, that is true.
The first thing to address that is I just looked at the Jupyter Hub repo, and like the first thing you see when you look at the Jupyter Hub repo is a link to the Gitter chat room. So that's probably part of why people are there. So if I make the first link, to the Google group or something, and make the Gitter link less prominent, that might be enough to direct the traffic.
So
let's decide. Yeah, let's decide a little bit how we want to organize this. I think we want to reduce a little bit the prominence of Gitter as an entry point for users, at least. It's not that we never want to talk to a user on Gitter, but we don't want them to land on Gitter first, is what we're saying.
Yeah.
So why don't we remove, on this docs landing page, remove the per repo link to Gitter chat rooms?
Sounds good.
And then somewhere in our docs, we're going to have like a getting help section, and we could link first to the Jupyter mailing list, and also probably IPythonDev, and then to one Gitter help.
Yeah. Possibly more than one getting help section even. We might want a user level help and developer level help or something.
Okay.
Accessible if you type in the shibboleth.
We did merge the IPythonDev and IPython user into one list. I don't want to start having different places to merge them later.
For now, let's see how far we can go with our unified community view.
And then what is our official Gitter user room?
Let's keep IPython and IPython help. Or here.
Yeah, basically keep the ones we already had.
Your Jupyter by now?
What?
The main room should no longer be IPython if we change names to Jupyter. It should be Jupyter/Jupyter, which is where the primary docs are.
But we already have people on IPython. And it's a link. People will just click on it, they won't read. You know how people are.
Well, yes. But I mean, we already had IPython. I'm trying to put this in terms of if we're rebranding, are we fully, is it full? Or are people in there just about for IPython?
We could just pick a new name for the chat room every week or so.
Keep people from it.
Everyone.
No, I think it probably makes sense to have a central room for both org that's public. And so I think IPython, and Jupyter as being the, if you don't know where to discuss things, that's the default, unless it's really specialized per repo.
And have one for each rather than just one?
Let's try having
That's easy. There is no Jupyter room. Don't use it. 404.
Oh, yes. This is actually a good point. I think Matthias is being funny, but we, as far as we can tell, once you have created a Gitter room, there is no way to remove it. So be careful in creating new rooms, because that is a one-way operation. We can
Make them, but not delete them.
If we don't make Jupyter, we can keep everyone in IPython. But if we make Jupyter,
That's it.
there's no way that we can find to get rid of IPython.
Okay.
Yeah, I think moving forward, we want to help our users understand the difference between Jupyter and IPython. They're really different.
Yeah, but they will be first on the GitHub issue tracker, then on the mailing list, and then if really there is a problem, we'll point them to Gitter. I think by the time they might have understand the difference, in my opinion.
Yeah, this is a tricky one because the IPython room does have 378 people already on it. So it is already kind of a very active space. How do we organize?
I mean, we can wait and just sort of see what happens as we start to migrate.
Yeah, and I think part of it is maybe wait to split until there's enough.
Yeah.
Basically wait until it's annoying that these Jupyter conversations are happening
On IPython.
at the same time in the same place as IPython conversation.
Okay.
But I don't think there's enough going on that we need them to be separate yet, and wait until there's kind of too much going on in one room to create a second room.
Yeah, let's definitely not keep the proliferation of rooms.
Skip another room.
Well, for dev to dev communication, I find having lots of rooms actually very nice. Because, for example, like a classic example is that Jupyter Hub and the widgets rooms are fairly busy. It would be horribly difficult and confusing to have interleaved conversations about those two topics at the same time.
Sure, and you can start in IPython, and if there is too many people, say, hey, let's move on the room repo, but on the...
It would almost be nice if you could have like anonymous rooms rather than each one being tied to a repo. I know you can make channels and things, but if you could just like click a selection of people and say like
we could just
make
have
a room.
We could just have a channel for each BIDS meeting room.
Yeah, I mean, yeah.
Just have like A, B, C, D.
Honestly, something like that, because I think it's more
that it matters less what the topic is, and that more just let's step aside.
Technically, we can because we have a Jupyter org, and you can make with the pound. You can make
you can
channels.
make an arbitrary number of arbitrarily named
channels.
Yeah.
So you can make Jupyter/topic.
Yeah, I mean maybe.
And then make subgroups.
But I'm even thinking like maybe it shouldn't be topic. Maybe it should be just like Jupyter/A, Jupyter/B.
Just
and then there's kind of a central room that people hang out in, and like if you're kicking off what's going to be more than a couple of messages of conversation, you say
it's more
in A.
Yeah, it's more analogous to what we have in BIDS of
meeting rooms.
Yeah, we are going to annoy people if we have this conversation in the public space. Let's go grab a room.
Yeah.
And the room doesn't have anything to do with the conversation.
Yes, it's about the chatter. It's about having the chatter in the public space.
They can be created on the fly, right?
Yeah.
So,
but I don't. For someone who is remote from almost everyone in the project, I literally use the topical Gitter rooms to see what you're all working on each day. Per repo. And so the
topic is
the repo.
Useful.
Yeah.
It's useful information for me. It really. Yeah.
No, the repos are a good starting point. I mean, the idea is that the repos are a good way of defining a default topic or topical organization. And the question is it a sufficient topical organization or not? And I guess that's what we're figuring out. Okay, well, we have some decisions moving forward. We definitely seem to be wanting to reduce the prominence at least of Gitter. So one set of links that I think definitely then we want to update though is the prominence of the Gitter links in the front pages of the two main websites, IPython.org and Jupyter.org, because those are also drivers of traffic. Those links are the top level website links are going to be drivers of traffic to those chat rooms.
Okay. Well, yeah, I think all of our funneling of sort of users getting help is going to change with this docs landing page.
Yeah.
Like, I think all doc links for both orgs are going to point to this, and so yes, as part of that, we'll clean up
update that. Yeah.
Existing IPython.org.
But I mean, even I don't think having the main docs page doesn't mean we will eliminate. I think the main sites. I mean, hopefully soon enough we'll do a complete redesign of the main web pages, but we're not going to remove the main web pages tomorrow. So there's still going to be some links there, so we should just not forget to update those. Okay, what else? Let's continue going through.
After you have the kernels and you have Python R and Julia. I think we have a lot of kernels, and I'm not sure it's a good idea to manually list everything. I would much rather try to push towards something like what Nicolas did, so proof of concept, where you have this page with all the kernels and you can search.
Well, I mean, this, in my mind, this is that. For now, like this is the MVP of MVP of that.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, the other option is that our page only links to the kernels. Well, I mean, Python, R, and Bash are kernels that we ourselves, like as an org,
have created.
Now I put Julia there.
And not the Julia one, and the Go kernel is also from us. And I wrote a proof of concept for JavaScript kernel a few years back. I mean, why not Ruby, which is pretty active? Why not Haskell, which is a lot also active?
I think I like the way Fernando has talked about this as IPython, kind of IPython is to Jupyter as CPython is to Python.
Mm-hmm.
That it's kind of the reference thing, and I would.
Well, but
I might even like I probably wouldn't have on that top level page. I think there are maybe too many links to IPython things, and then I would probably have maybe fewer links to IPython, and then you end up to take you to kind of the IPython world.
Well, but here's the issue. I'm a user. I'm using the Jupyter notebook, and I have a question about widgets. And I'm using widgets in the notebook. They're going to come here, and they're going to click on the notebook documentation.
Yeah, that's a good point. I don't know.
Can I remind you that the notebook have a help menu, which is like that you can configure in function of the kernel. So usually users should just basically click help and go to documentation, and they will get the page from their kernel.
But won't that sleep?
What? I didn't hear your last question.
I mean, we'll have to think about what help links we offer in the help menu of the notebook, but I'm assuming that those help links will link to various places in this landing page and or the individual
it's on the docs. If someone uses the IPython kernel and click on the help menu, he gets IPython help, and if he's using the Jupyter kernel, it will land on Jupyter help, on Julia.
Yeah, no, absolutely. There's some of that for sure. Okay. But I'm thinking about someone who listens to a partially derivative podcast where they're saying, "Wow, Jupyter's amazing." They go to Jupyter.org and click on documentation, and they're thinking, "I heard that you can use Scala with the Jupyter notebook. How do I do that?" And if they get to this page and there's no list of kernels here, and no even links to kernels.
Oh,
They're dead-ended.
so it's either all of them, or none.
Yeah, I think that it does make sense for it to be either. Now I'm getting echo of me.
Right?
Maybe either Python.
Can't mute
If you
ourselves.
mute up,
I don't know why we're echoing.
Yeah, now we're getting echo.
Can you mute by a brand?
Okay. Yeah, I think it should either be everything or just Python. I think I think a subset is too
Kind of unfair to the others.
It's too hard to draw the line, right?
I mean,
And when you have a line, then you have to argue about where the line goes. And if you just don't have a line,
And a link to each language, to each kernel, not subdocumentation of kernel, it's fine. Like here is a Python kernel.
I think I would do it more as. I think I would have like a few links to different bits of the IPython documentation, like links to widgets and things, and then a fairly prominent box or whatever saying, for other languages, see this page, and that links into.
sure, that's there.
What?
That's there at the bottom. I mean, I sort of.
I mean, I honestly feel like the parallel and traitlets are completely irrelevant.
yeah, I wouldn't put parallel and traitlets on a Jupyter, because the widgets are a Jupyter thing.
Okay.
And traitlets is pretty much irrelevant. Unless you want to, you'll get there if you want to go to like configuring Jupyter.
Brian,
You might
It's weird.
But I want to talk.
You want the echo, maybe is the echo coming from Brian? I wonder if it's coming from
No, it's coming from Brian.
How do you know?
Do you have your earplugs? We shouldn't get.
Yeah, it can't. The echo can't come from me. I have earplugs.
It is coming from you.
Everybody else is muted, so it must be.
And when we mute you, the echo stops. Is it coming out of your computer and not your headphones anymore? Because it didn't echo.
Check your sound preferences. Maybe you got.
Yeah, I think I would probably link to IPython Parallel because that kind of has a long history of being a public thing from IPython. Definitely not traitlets.
I guess.
Traitlets isn't going to be advanced
to use.
Yeah, I guess part of my thinking was that I think we have in our minds at least a somewhat well-formed sense of which kernels are just toys and which kernels we would actually recommend people trying for real work. And so from a user perspective, I'm not sure that it's helpful for them to see all 40 kernels, when in reality, I probably wouldn't recommend more people use them for real work on more than a half dozen of them.
I'm sorry, but
there are some where it's very clear with what that is, but there are others where it's not very clear. Like I wrote the bash thinking this is just a toy example, and then it turned out that people actually do seriously find that useful. So I think, as Min said, like if you draw a line, then you have to have a whole bunch of arguments about when we draw the line.
No, I'm truly of two minds on this one. I'm very torn because on the one hand, I would have more or less made that same sort of saying, well, the name was actually inspired by those three languages, kind of Julia, Python, and R. It was sort of the choosing the three open languages of data science. Bash is a good fourth one because it is the default systems. It's the default shell, and it means that, well, the reason, Matthias, even though you make a frowning face, is because it brings effectively the same literate computing paradigm to systems programming, and so it lets you incorporate.
Sure, but people will just try VI in the bash kernel.
What's that?
It's even try to run VI in the bash kernel or
No,
Max.
no, but once that kernel was written, then that blog post demonstrating its capabilities made a very good example of actually why it was actually a really good idea. So I actually would have drawn that that subset in that same way. But at the same time, I can see the argument from the authors of some of the other kernels saying, well, why isn't ours equally prominently there? The Haskell kernel was written very early. Yes, it is a much more niche language from a programming language breadth community. It's a much more specialized and smaller community, but it's a very good kernel. It's from a community member who has participated very closely with our development, who has contributed a lot, who wrote actually the most useful bit of documentation ever before we had any documentation, right? Who has participated very actively in our process. And so, in many ways, the Haskell kernel has probably a better claim to being on that page than some of the others. And you can probably go down the list of the 40 and find a few others like that, right? Maybe not all 40, but a few others. So yeah, I can really see both sides, and that's where the the point that Ian was making of once you start drawing this boundary, having to have a policy starts getting tricky. It becomes a pretty compelling argument. So I am very much of two minds here.
Yeah, I think in a lot of ways the doc would be best if we drew that line. I'm just afraid of talking about the line.
Yeah, and of how exhausting it becomes.
Yes,
because
the line.
We
don't talk about the line.
Because we are
red line.
Because this becomes a very prominent place to advert. It's one thing to say we have a wiki page where anyone can add themselves to the list, and that's good. It's another one to say these are our docs. Sure, you can make a PR to be listed on it, but we can reject that PR.
Well, and there's also the nice kernel index page, which is probably what we should link to rather than the wiki.
Yeah,
once that finishes existing.
Yeah, definitely. I do think it would be valuable with the kernel index page to try to have some way of indicating how
production versus toy.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, I think there is a flag for that.
Well, I mean, you can kind of self-identify. You can let.
I don't think it should be a binary thing because I mean, this is a.
Well, in PyPI classifiers, there's 5 levels or something.
Yeah, alpha, beta, whatever.
Maybe something like that, but also maybe some kind of number of votes or something like GitHub stars or something.
You could literally use GitHub stars.
Maybe we can commute. What do you folks think of leaving? Maybe going back to this idea that Min mentioned we've used to talk before about it. If we want to skirt this discussion, because it can get endless, and I can see some of the authors of some of the other kernels really getting into it. I mean, I just looked at the page. Now we're at 42, and
I haven't put Kling on there.
And there's Kling coming, and I saw there's somebody asking about Maxima, so that's going to be another one coming. And Maxima is probably going to be that's one that I would love to see be really good. That would be an actual sort of in the style of Maple and Mathematica. That would be kind of like the classic mathematical computing one. So
I got some feedback from Will Whitney, hydrogen developer, on this when I was in Boston. So Will Whitney of Hydrogen, he tested almost every kernel that he could get to run against Hydrogen. And was like, I really wish there was a set of official kernels because some of these are just so far out there. Clearly don't work, and they're in a weird state. They're not really following the message spec, and I think a lot of users want to know that too.
Sure.
For 0 and Q, there's these ones are official and known, and then there's ones on the side, like the 0 and Q bindings for Node are not official. And there's kind of like a fracture there. I think.
Well, maybe eventually we can set up a way of ensuring that people provide an actual Docker image, and we can have a build bot a build button and provide a state.
We have the kernel test tool which is in progress. And we can mark.
And then we can expose like an actual like buildbot state and have a little page with a dashboard where you can see the green-red state of that kernel. Like, oh, this kernel has actually been tested, and you can see does it currently pass the test suite or not.
And potentially, yeah.
But
it could even be like, which features from the test suite is it going to be?
Exactly. Yeah. But let's not get too distracted on that. Because we were trying to kind of finish up the documentation discussion because Brian and John put a lot of work into that, and so we need to decide, at least make some high-level decision on the structure of these docs. What do you folks think then of falling back a little bit to the notion of updating this section with an explanation of the idea that we provide, as with the analogy of the reference implementation? We explain what that means, that IPython is the reference kernel for the system. We explain what that means, and then we just redirect to the IPython docs in general, and these docs have a section on what the IPython part of the documentation is, and that's it. And then and there could even be a maybe that link that is there is sufficient. Just the link, this link that says see this page for a full list of kernels.
And keeping in mind that it will that link will be the much nicer kernel index page that Nicholas is working on.
Exactly.
I think I would make that. I think I would make that link a bit more prominent.
I would maybe maybe you can do that first.
Also box or something.
Yeah. But so how does that sound? Brian, if you're going to speak.
I unmuted.
He'll still be able to hear us. You don't have to make hand motions at him.
I think, I guess I don't know. I think I think we're missing out on an opportunity to. I mean, let me put it this way. Zeppelin and Rodeo are getting a lot of traction right now for what I think is extremely minor marketing points that they have on their front pages. Hey, we support Spark. Even though, Jupyter supports Spark just fine. And I think we're missing out on marketing opportunities.
Yeah, but that's not a documentation page. That's a landing page.
I think it is. I think it's. I mean, with the R community right now, I think the R kernel works really well, and I think our assets on the web, websites, documentation, should leverage that. I think what we have for R is really fantastic, and I think putting that on a
frankly, you've tried the Haskell kernel. You've seen what the Haskell kernel can do. You've seen, like, when you write a piece of Haskell, it tells you, hey, you can rewrite it better and faster in this way.
But and this is the important point here, is it's not about the quality of the kernel. And this is where I agree there are many different ways of drawing a cut. I think the quality of the kernel cut is one cut that is important. The other issue is that right now R is the most used language in data science. Like, in terms of numbers of users, it is beating Python today. And I think for us to relegate it to the second page it hurts us. Even though the quality of the R kernel right now it's not feature parity with Python, and maybe it's not as good quality as Haskell. I don't know. It's not a question of the quality of the kernel. It's a question of how many users want to use that kernel.
So taking it from the perspective of in order to communicate the value of Jupyter as a whole,
yes.
What are the points that in today's climate we should mention? And one of those points is Spark, and one of those points is R.
It really is, yeah.
Yeah, and I think what this points to is when we're talking about the architecture, it would be unfair, say, to the Haskell kernel in a page about the language neutrality of the architecture to list sort of R or bash and not list Haskell, right? Or not list, I don't know, F# or whatever else. But the point you're making is that Jupyter as a platform for modern data science has strengths that are unique and compelling and have levels of integration across these languages that other systems out there don't actually have. And that is something that we actually need to convey. But I think what that says is the documentation needs to have a section, and it should be a top-level, prominent, clearly marked section for that indicates that point very clearly at the very top and very explicitly. Rather than, but we shouldn't abuse the section on the language-neutral kernel architecture and do a disservice to the other language communities by saying, well, we really want to do a better job marketing in the space of data science right now. So let's elbow the languages that are less popular. Let's elbow them out of the room because they happen to be less popular than R, because they're more abstract or kind of more computer sciencey. Let's elbow them out of the room. No, that's not what we should do. They deserve the same place at the table than any other language. What we should do is have a section in the documentation that is called Jupyter as a data science platform. And when that is the section of the documentation, from that perspective, then the boundary is very clear. It's exactly those four: Python, Julia, R, and Bash. Because that's it.
And maybe
and probably Spark.
Yeah, I was going to say Scala, Spark.
And Scala Spark. Well, Spark with both Scala and PySpark, because it's both, right? It's the fact that you have the native Scala access and the fact that you have also the Python access, and that they're both natively out of the box ready for you, because you have basically all the languages from data science, and you have the system language of any Unix box, which is Bash. That's what you get, right? And it's the integration of all those systems in a single environment out of the box with an editor and a terminal and the rest. And that is a different story than a language-neutral architecture around 40 kernels.
But to some extent, like, who are we to decide, like, these are the languages of data science? I'm sure there are people out there who use many and varied languages for data science.
Well, but today that's more or less what the reality is. This may change. This may change in a few years, but that right now, this is where the market is, and this is the reality.
I mean,
my impression is that, like, Julia is still a, if we are doing languages of data science today, then Julia is
not on that list.
Julia is
growing.
Julia is something that people may adopt over the next few years.
Yeah, and that's why Python and R are the very widely used ones. Spark is basically a big framework, and Julia is a very interesting one that is growing and that we participated in. So we're basically, this is our opinionated view of this collection of tools.
Yeah. How about
have the arguments when people come and say this language is important for data science, it should be on there.
But So I think, what if we structure this section of that page as start out by acknowledging that we have over 40 kernels that Jupyter runs for multiple languages, and then provide a link, say here's all those kernels, a link to the page that has a list of all those kernels, and then immediately go into here's a list of a data science / featured kernels that are the main ones in this space. And explicitly make the distinction between here's all of them, our platform is language neutral, we have it all, but then here's some that are sort of featured slash, I don't care if we call it featured or, data science related, however we want to brand that.
Yeah, part of how you describe it would change if you just called it featured kernels, I would make sure that Haskell and Calico are on there.
Okay.
Because they've been they're strong. They're really good kernels that are actively maintained and heavy contributors to the project in general. But if you want to, in some ways, that's why I would almost try to, if you're trying to hit points like we work well with R, do it in a way that's something other than a kernel list, as a Jupyter for data science, you say, and do it in a more prosaic way, where it's like, Jupyter has an R kernel. It works really well. You can use Jupyter with Python works great with Spark. Jupyter with the Scala kernel, rather than kind of a bulleted. That I think it's easier, even though it really is amounting to a list of if you kind of restructure it as something other than a bulleted list of kernels, then I think it's easier to emphasize particular kernels for a reason. Like, we want to make sure that it's prominent that we work well with R. We want to make sure that it's prominent that we work well with Spark. Doing that in a way that's not necessarily a bulleted list of kernel names, I think makes it easier for that to not be, these are our whitelists. I don't know. Does that make sense?
Yeah, although one of the big things I was trying with this page was to have it be as short as possible.
Yeah.
And so, I think we can walk a balance.
Vein, like the kind of the advertising style, this is features that we support. To my mind, that belongs on the home page, not the docs landing page. Python has Python.org is the kind of glitzy advertising homepage, and then docs.python.org is where you go when you're looking for specific pieces of information.
Yeah, that makes sense. But it also brings up one point that one of the ideas I kind of took home from Write the Docs, whenever that was, recently, was that people will arrive at your docs. People will not arrive at your docs where you want them to. So, well, it does make sense to put the information in the right places. Whenever you're putting stuff together, you should try to emphasize as much as possible the ability to get everywhere from everywhere. Right, that people are going to land on some weird page in your docs, and you want them to still be able to get to Jupyter.org or the docs landing page.
So what about sections on the table of contents, which basically allow you to list off kernels, and we accept all PRs that just point to the documentation of each kernels? Just that. So we can, anyone send a PR, I want a link to the docs of brainfuck, or and on the side, in all pages, you have a link to each kernel's documentation.
But those are external projects. We're not going to be building those. That's what this link is, and right now it links to the.
Yeah, but it's on the front page. But I want something in the table of content which will appear on the side of the docs.
You could have a list of certified kernels. Like that's pass a bunch of tests or satisfy some requirements that are your requirements to the list.
Thomas is creating. Right?
No, because you cannot jump. You cannot.
That Nicholas is creating.
Yeah.
People won't see that. They won't see, basically what Min says is you should be able to jump from everywhere to everywhere.
I didn't mean necessarily in just one click, but at least if,
let's not get too much into the weeds. I think it's clear that we seem to agree that we want the basic kernel description to be sort of an agnostic description of the design of the architecture, the idea that IPython is a reference implementation in the Python programming language with its own specific syntactic additions, a link maybe for now to the current wiki page and in the future, or to Nicholas's nicer page that hopefully will have things like status and feature completeness and whatnot, and probably a little bit more prominent than it is right now. And then the question and potentially a nicer page that is something like Jupyter as a data science platform. I do agree that a page like that is probably better done really nicely on the main website.
On Jupyter.org.
I don't think it's a problem to start drafting it right now here, because I mean this is HTML at the end of the day. We can always just move it somewhere else. So if we make it as a section right here for now, we can just move it somewhere else.
Well,
so if this is where we happen to be typing right now, great. I mean text can be cut and pasted from one place to another one later on. So that's not a big deal. I mean the point is that we're thinking that way, and that's what's valuable. So
it's not in multiple cells.
So as long as we're doing the work, that's what's good. We're thinking in that direction. We're building that content. We can just move it to the side. I do think we want that to be prominent because that is a message that we want to convey. And I actually do agree with the idea that that's more kind of website marketing rather than reference documentation. But it can start here, and we can just move it out there.
Yeah. So I like that, although I think there should be traces of that in the documentation organization for the cases where people don't end up at our homepage, but they just go straight to the docs.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the way it would be described in the docs would obviously be less marketing focused and more sort of just factual. Like, here's the documentation for these data science related things.
Yes.
But yes.
One very easy thing to say is, for example, a typical use case is to bundle the following kernels in a standard installation. Typical deployment use case is to bundle Jupyter Hub with a Python, Julia, R, and Bash, and often Spark kernels for standard data science research and education users. And here's more information on that topic. That's a perfectly valid thing to do in documentation, because it is true. People do use that kind of thing very often, right?
Yeah. So why don't? So I think I have enough information to reorganize this page.
Cool.
At least into another draft, and we'll iterate. But I wanted to cover this at least the notebook Sphinx integration.
Yes. Yeah. That's what we're going to be using for the rest for today and tomorrow and Thursday.
Yeah. So John and I also started to develop an MVP of integrating individual notebooks into Sphinx, and the thing that we're
what I always thought the YT conversion did, which it didn't. So I'm glad you guys actually started on the actual conversion.
Yeah, so we are prototyping this using NB-Convert's existing notebook to restructured text conversion, and then with a custom template. And our idea is to put the individual notebook files directly into the Sphinx source tree and version control both the notebook and the generated Sphinx. As Min asks, why track the generated rest? And that's because installing NB-Convert and Pandoc on Read the Docs is going to be a bit of a nightmare. So we'll have to
the Pandoc part.
Yeah,
NB-Convert itself isn't actually hard to get on Read the Docs.
Okay.
But
Pandoc is.
Yeah, I'm sure it is, because I think they only allow you to do a requirements.txt. So unless we
not like arbitrary apt-get.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so we would add a notebook or an IPythonDev rule to the makefile to build the restructured text files from their notebook sources.
The other thing to be careful with is that Read the Docs does not run your makefile. It invokes Sphinx directly.
Yes, no, absolutely. And so we would need to list these pages, the REST versions of these pages in all the index files and and set it up so that when it gets to read the docs, it would build it without the make file.
Okay, so yeah, we need to run make ourselves before commit. And push.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. We need to do the dependency run.
Or you build on Kubernetes and you push on different pages. What we are doing for critical.
Well,
we're not doing that.
Okay. Okay. So that's a problem because then we wouldn't even track the RST at all. If we're gonna
the only reason we're tracking RST is because
to avoid the pandoc dependency.
And that's the same thing.
And that's the same thing as Qt. I mean,
yeah.
So if we're gonna avoid the pandoc dependency, so you guys need to decide.
It's also if you want to install pandoc on Travis, as far as I know, you have to
sudo.
You have to use sudo apt-get, which then makes it.
We do install pandoc on Travis, and we don't use sudo or apt-get.
Okay. How?
We have a binary that we just grab.
Right, okay. I mean, we could probably do that on read the docs if we wanted to.
I guess you could do a PyPI package. That's probably not the best plan.
The other reason I think it's not a bad idea to have the REST files in version control is that they're going to be much easier to code review than the raw notebook files.
True. A few additional benefits of this. You get the little show source link. Things you have the RST there, so you can see the source, the actual text source for the page right there, which can be nice. And also, it makes for a more standard deployment workflow with less weirdo moving parts, which means other projects are more likely to adopt the workflow.
And one downside, we will inevitably get people editing the restructured text.
So our plan is to have a custom NB-convert template that has a huge banner at the top.
At least puts a gigantic at the top.
Auto-generated. Do not edit this by hand.
What was the main takeaway from Write the Docs, men?
People don't read the docs.
Yeah.
They don't read the docs?
Yeah. And they especially probably don't read comments and docs. But
but at least you do put one of those big triple 3 lines of asterisks, boldface everywhere.
Yeah, it's not hard. It will happen once in a while. It's not hard to edit the source file.
Yeah. So one question about Sphinx that I don't know is when we start converting notebooks, NB-convert will create directories, subdirectories for the static assets associated with that notebook. Will Sphinx be happy with that, or do we need to put all those static assets into a separate directory and rewrite the paths?
I think Sphinx is happy with that.
I think Sphinx is fine.
They may need to get added.
We've got figures and stuff.
Yeah, they may need to get added to some index files. I mean, it's okay with adding directories.
If you do it before Sphinx, I think it'll be fine. If you're doing this in this two-stage thing that you're talking about, I think it's fine because we've got figures in the message spec docs and stuff that are just local in like a figures directory, and I don't think we have anything. I think they just get copied over. They may only get copied over if it finds a reference to them, but it resolves local references, so I don't think it's a problem. The only thing that might have been a problem is if we did the split as a part of the Sphinx build step, and if the Sphinx picking up files to relocate happened before that. But if you're doing it in this two-stage thing, I don't think it's a problem.
So, so the other, let me see, I'm just looking through here. The last thing is that basically I think we should start to move over all of our notebook-based documentation to use this, and so pull everything out of examples and then put the relevant notebooks into the source Sphinx trees of the various read the docs Sphinx-based documentation. And so I think, but at some point here, we're getting into all the work we're going to be doing today and Thursday on tutorial materials, notebooks, etc.
Sure.
And this will require us to have notebooks that don't have, in our documentation at least, notebooks that don't have handwritten HTML in Markdown, because that won't get converted.
Yeah.
My brain didn't parse that sentence for some
You
reason.
cannot use
We can
HTML.
only use Markdown. We can't do the like Markdown is just a superset of HTML.
Oh,
we can do arbitrary HTML in here thing.
Yeah, sounds good. This is wonderful. Thank you so much, Brian and Sick John, for this.
Thanks, Sick John.
So,
by the way, where is that even draft template code? Like that converted to script?
I'm going to have to talk to John about that and sort of see where it is. It may be in
Internet.
I'm not sure it's anywhere on the internet yet.
Yeah, even if it's like draft hackish, like non-mergeable anything.
I don't think he's pushed it anywhere.
Yeah. So I can work on that this afternoon, and I'm willing. I'm going to obviously get food here, but I can sync with you guys whenever on all this stuff.
Cool. Yeah, we'll probably right after this we'll probably go fetch a bite around noon, and we'll be pounding on this. We may be able to get this rumor or not rumor. Okay. Tag consolidation.
Let's postpone that.
Okay. Postpone that.
Didn't we already discuss tag consolidation in the previous? I thought we decided that only one of them.
Yeah, and I think we want to have a larger set of common tags across repos. I mean, my understanding is that we have not yet agreed on what those common tags would be, not that.
Yeah, and we can agree a lot on a lot of things during meetings, and we don't do them during the week.
Well,
So if you want common tags on, just decide on a set, and we just say yes or no, and go with that.
yeah. But I think we've met too long today, so let's just. I don't even want to get into it.
Okay. All right. So Brian, you seemed to have enough info in your head to do a little bit of restructuring on that draft. It was a great, wonderful start. Thanks so much.
Can you mute yourself when you don't speak, Brian, please?
It's really weird that you're getting. It's very odd that you have headphones and it's managing to generate such a bad echo. I don't
It's
understand.
because of the NSA. Someone at the NSA is intercepting Brian communication, and it's
and they forgot to turn off the echo loop at the NSA today.
That's so silly. There's a live feed.
So okay, today was a long meeting actually, but we got through a lot, and I'm very excited that we're actually making progress on all this stuff. I guess I do have one last question on the kind of the status of all the 4.0 work and.
Docs, I think most repos now have at least something docs related.
Yeah.
I've just got the Jupyter console docs on Read the Docs during this meeting. Literally the only thing there is the config options doc at the moment. But we have skeletons in place for almost everything. John has some PRs for the widget installation stuff. We're just going to effectively, the server and the kernel will have a hard-coded check for 4.0, like, look, try to import the widgets. If it fails, then carry on anyway. The server prints a warning saying, could not import the widgets. What was the migration thing?
Yeah, config migration is.
Did that get merged?
No.
No. And there was some, Matthias, I think you were You were reviewing that?
I looked this morning, and on the list of PRs was still things to do 0 on 4, so I didn't look. We just need to check the checkbox.
I'll check the checkboxes and then Matthias will review.
So then I can look at it. I looked also at TypeScript doc and converting all the JavaScript to TypeScript in the notebook.
Yeah, but that's a post 4.0 thing.
What's your sense of 4.0 time frame?
I would still like to be aiming for before
SciPy? That'd be wonderful.
Like to beta by the end of the week and.
Great. I mean that was kind of my gut feeling, but I just wanted a reality check from you guys.
I don't know if I would quite say beta by the end of this week if we're going to be sprinting on tutorial materials.
Yeah, that's going to take a lot of work.
Yeah, we're not going to make really much of any progress this week.
So it won't be released by SciPy. And SciPy is in 4 weeks.
Okay, but order of magnitude, it's
SciPy.
getting there. Yeah, it's getting there. We're good. Okay, good. Yeah. And any updates on real time, Matthias?
That's why I'm trying to push TypeScript, but if TypeScript doesn't move forward, it's hard.
TypeScript pushes back.
TypeScript pushes back?
Yes, a lot.
Okay. Well, your battles with.
I mean, I would like to start converting some things to TypeScript to really move forward, but if it's for 4.0, there isn't much I can do.
Yeah, and I think probably the majority of that should be post 4.0. I'm concerned that if we all kind of say, oh, 4.0 is still some way away, I can try to get this in the meantime, then it just delays 4.0 more and more.
Yeah, no, and I certainly don't want to block Matthias because I know that that's delaying Kestra as well, and there's kind of a chain effect there. We haven't talked to Kestra in a while. Have you been in touch with him?
We are doing a talk at SciPy on real time.
Okay, all right.
They asked me to review that one. I was a SciPy talks reviewer. I said I think there's a conflict of interest.
Yeah.
Actually, I suggested that of the 6 talks and posters that they asked me to review, 5 were connected to IPython in some way.
Yeah, that's my
I think there might be some conflicts of interest, but that was the only one that I actually got them to take off my plate. The others were not by us, at least.
All right. Well, good luck with TypeScript. But yes, this means that we really do need to curtail any kind of creep into 4.0 so that it doesn't keep blocking things like. Kestra.
Yeah, in some ways we want to get 4.0 out specifically so that you can start doing that stuff.
Yeah, as aggressively.
We can move to TypeScript. I mean, most of things without adding functionality. It's just refactoring and cleaning stuff.
Yeah, but that's a very large and time-consuming project.
I mean, I'm doing around one file per day.
Okay, so that'll take 40 days.
And 49.
I mean, we don't need to convert everything. The thing is, we can convert part of the notebook to TypeScript,
yes,
and it works. I mean, right now my notebook on my machine.
You're saying like do it before 4.0?
Part of it.
And
I mean, if there are certain bits that are done.
I mean, yeah, we have already.
I'd have no objection to them going into 4.0, but I would rather everyone was working on pushing 4.0 out as quickly as possible.
Getting it done.
Rather than getting extra things into 4.8.
We're not going to make this decision now, 2 hours into a meeting. So.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks, Internet. Thanks, everyone.
Bye, Muted Brian.
If I can find a mouse.
Bye.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Excellent.